Well, hello, you good people, and welcome to Life on Earth.
Yay, we're on Earth today.
I'm revamping the theme song, so I didn't set that up.
Oh, okay. Welcome to Life on Earth. Okay,
Yeah,
there
see,
you go.
it's going to sound like this. Okay, there's the short version for you. So, hello, you good people, and welcome to Life on Earth. Today is Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. And this is a special episode of Life on Earth. We're going to do something we don't normally do. And by special request was from the co-host.
Yes, that is from me.
Because we're officially changing the name of the show to Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir.
Wow.
You know, everything's done under the Robert Nasir brand. The website is robertnasir.com. It's all Robert Nasir this, Robert Nasir that. Part of that is because Amy actually has two jobs. She's got a full-time day job besides helping me produce this show and my other podcast. But
yes,
she has not missed an episode.
I have not
of either Life on Earth or 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. So it's about damn time we at least add her name to this. So this is now officially, and thank you and welcome to Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir. And as I say, by special request, something we don't normally do, something I hardly ever do,
yes,
is get into the politics of the day. Why don't I get into the politics of the day? Because there are so many good people already doing such a good job with that.
Yes.
And it's very rare that I even want to talk about that stuff. But, you know, this week's been kind of political. They've been revisiting. In fact, Ben Baer with Augustina at ARI had a good discussion revisiting the abortion issue. Whoa, there's one that'll rip the left and the right apart from each other.
Love that issue.
And other political issues that have been in the news this week, developments in critical race theory. I thought CRT stood for cathode ray tube, but no, they're dragging me into the current politics with critical race theory and wokeism. And on the Ayn Rand Center UK, of course, we've had hosts talking about leaving California and the fact that Newsom somehow did not lose his job, Governor Newsom out in California. So folks who are longtime Californians, such as our own local celebrities, Mark Pellegrino and Rucka, they're talking about leaving California. So it is a political week. It's a political time, so much so that even I am dragged into it by what? All of these events, but also my co-host. It is Amy who said, well, we need to talk.
Yeah, I want to kind of talk seriously about critical race theory and cancel culture.
Yes.
And just try to kind of unpack the perceived notion of critical race theory is from a lot of my liberal friends and coworkers and good people.
Liberal friends and coworkers and good people. Now,
whoa.
As you can guess, I wouldn't describe myself as a liberal. Amy wouldn't describe herself as a liberal.
Yeah.
And yet somehow we have friends and coworkers and even family who would describe themselves as liberals. And this gets back to a topic that I've been bringing up on and off on those rare occasions when I talk about these kinds of things. Since the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. About a year after he got elected, the conversations were hot and heavy, people trying to figure out what to make of this. A lot of people saying, hey, just go along for the ride. We were hoping all these years for an independent, non-political president, and we got one. And hey, he was on, quote unquote, our side. So, hey, what more could you want? And after all, you go to war with the army you've got, so you go to war with the general you've got. And yet at the same time, that first year, people were saying the most foolish things about the culture war. And I thought, and still think, the culture war is an important war that needs to be fought. We can't afford to say foolish things. So what I wrote at the time was, if you think you understand the left, you don't understand the left. And more specifically, if you think the right, our right, the right is complex and nuanced and interesting. There's important differences between Rand Paul and Mike Lee libertarian types and conservatives a la Ted Cruz and the Freedom Caucus. Remember them?
Oh, yes, the Republican Freedom Caucus.
And the pragmatists like our new president, Donald Trump, and the milquetoast establishment types like Mitch McConnell and the Bush family. If you think that's all interesting and nuanced and there's variety and there's a lot of different perspectives on the right, but
Ian Hersey Alley even.
But you think the left is monolithic. They're all the same.
It's all monolithic.
If you think that, you don't understand the left. So many people on the right get the left so very wrong because we don't see individuals anymore.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be talking today about really, really interesting individuals on the left that you might consider taking a look at and reading about and watching their YouTube videos and kind of seeing for yourself and judging for yourself. Are these people reasonable? Are they evil? Are they just mixed premises?
Yes.
Or are they saying about certain subjects like critical race theory and cancel culture, something important and something that's reasonable and something that's rational?
Wait, you think there are people on the left, people who still describe themselves as liberal, but are critical of critical race theory?
Yes.
Critical of wokeism. Critical of cancel culture.
Welcome to Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Wait. There are people on the left who have their eyes open.
Watch me bend the spoon.
And in some cases, because of their firsthand experience, have more intelligent things to say about it than a lot of our commentators on the right.
I think that would be a fair assessment.
Well, bring it on.
All right. Yeah. So I told Robert, I said, we need to talk about liberals owning the libs or taking on the libs. And they are, sadly. I mean, in a very good way, of course, but it's just come to this. And, a lot of folks on the left, namely Marxists and determinists and people who believe in equality of outcome as opposed to equality of opportunity or equality before the law, which is even better. They're actually differentiating themselves from the regular, I guess, the liberals. They're more the critical race theory people, cancel culture people are.
They're not liberal.
They're not liberal. They're illiberal.
They're illiberal.
What liberals would call these folks would be illiberal.
Illiberal. Yes. Daniel in the chat says founding fathers were liberals, and I'm going to die on that hill. Today's liberals are hardly worthy of that concept. And he's absolutely right. But again, the better people on the left we're talking about, at least to a substantial degree, are liberals in the better sense of the word.
And they're very liberal. And what I mean is, I'll take it. For instance, you may or may not have heard of Jody Shaw. Jody Shaw was a librarian.
Jody Shaw from Smith University.
Smith University in Massachusetts, very liberal college. She was alumna. And she really wanted to work her way up and do wonderful things for this college and basically promote the library and the resources of the library to the students. What had happened was during this time that she was there and trying to, promote herself and doing a really good job of what she was doing, she had been given the task to promote library resources in an unconventional way. And at the same time that a lot of the critical race theory, social justice programs were coming into place. And a lot of the staff and the teachers had to actually attend these mandatory meetings and such.
Diversity training.
Yeah, diversity training.
Yeah. Let me read a paragraph from Wiki, which is leaning a little bit left, but we'll read it anyway so you can see what happened. In October of 2020, Smith alumna, this is Smith College. I shouldn't call it Smith University. It's Smith College.
Right, that's right.
Smith alumna Jody Shaw, then student support coordinator in the Department of Residence Life, began posting videos commenting on mandated diversity trainings for the staff at Smith College on her YouTube channel. Shaw characterized the trainings as contributing to a climate of harassment discrimination and hostility at the college, especially for the staff. Shaw described the implementation of the trainings as psychologically abusive and the culture as deeply hostile and fearful.
Mhm.
I posted a link to her resignation letter
Yes.
in the show notes for this episode on Facebook. You can take a look at that after the show. It's definitely worth
And I have an
read.
excerpt actually from that.
Good. Bring it on.
Okay, so this is her basic idea here from Jody Shaw. She says, I ask that Smith College stop reducing my personhood, my person, my identity to a racial category. Stop telling me what I must think and feel about myself. Stop presuming to know who I am or what my culture is based, or what my culture is based upon my skin color. Stop asking me to project stereotypes and assumptions onto others based on their skin color. So there's a lot to unpack here, but before I do, let's go into this. This is an excerpt from her letter. So basically, she wanted to do a program to entice students to come to the library, learn about the resources there at the library, get some help. So she wanted to put that in rap form. Now, Jody Shaw is a musician, and she's actually done the rap and has it out on her YouTube channel in case you're interested. And it's actually really good. It's done very well. The music in it is very good. She's got a nice, low voice, and she talks about the library resources in a very fun, engaging way that would connect to today's youth. Right. So she mentioned that she was going to do this, and I don't know, just some very small amount of time before she was going to go ahead and present it, she was told that she can't do it.
She can't put out a rap video about the library resources.
Yeah, because she's white.
Because she's white.
Like this, I guess.
Now we've had, and somebody in the chat will remind me of the name, famously, we've had a white woman declare herself Black.
Right.
Based on her self-identity and her lived experience. Mm-hmm. Sorry about you listening on the audio. I'm holding up the air quotes when I say lived experience. If she can do that, but this woman can't rap about a resource which recently the Smithsonian claimed is a white kind of resource, libraries. Yeah, Scott is absolutely right. Rachel Dolezal is who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
She says, I'm Black. She ain't Black. If she can do that and get away with it for months before anybody finally gave her serious grief about it, I should say anybody on the left finally gave her serious grief about it, but Jody Shaw can't produce, Eminem. How many white rappers are there? Does this somehow not have credit? Anyway, I should let you continue.
Yeah. So basically, not only was she white, but it would be perceived as cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation. To do a rap song. Yeah, somebody needs to arrest Justin Bieber and Eminem
and Blondie.
Blondie with the original rap song Rapture.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously Jody Shaw had a bone to pick.
Yeah. So basically she pushed back and she questioned it. And then during this time that she was going through all these diversity trainings, critical race theory training, she was basically put on the spot and told to, tell the group, Jody, how you feel as a white woman. And so she was basically being asked to come up with a bunch of BS pulled out of her butt, like the other people were doing. And basically what she was being asked to do was to basically delimit herself, her own person, to this label that they were putting on her, which obviously is not, it's not only unrealistic, it's downright rude. So she wrote in her letter, under the guise of racial progress, Smith College has created a radically hostile environment in which individual acts of discrimination and hostility flourish. In this environment, people's worth as human beings and the degree to which they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect is determined by the color of their skin. It is an environment in which dissenting from the new critical race orthodoxy, or even failing to swear fealty to it, like some kind of McCarthy era loyalty oath, is grounds for public humiliation and professional retaliation. So anyway, she eventually resigned. They tried to buy her silence with a settlement and she refused. And now she's been making all of these YouTube videos, and she has been engaging in some legal discussions as well, as she should. So more power to her. Now, I should mention to you that Jodi Shaw is, I saw her on her Facebook feed today. She's basically promoting the idea that the ultra wealthy should be giving up their money, should be taxed at 100%.
Oh, yeah, Jodi's definitely on the left.
She's definitely on the left. I just should have you know.
Even though some of her opinions are more reasonable than some people on the right, she ain't a rightist.
No, she is not a conservative.
And I think that's one of the points we want to kind of make that should be running through the conversation today.
Yeah.
When we talk about the kind of liberals that are owning today's libs, when we talk about people like Barry Weiss, we're not talking about people who've become rightists.
Right.
We've got Dave Rubin on our list, but he's sort of become right wing.
Mm-hmm.
I would have said he went independent like the best of these liberals did, but he's really jumped on the Trump train.
Right.
And not to make it all about Trump, but just to make the point that when I talk about people like Peter I gotta keep practicing saying his name, Peter Boghossian,
yes,
and his recent resignation, when we talk about cultural commentators, when we talk about people like Lacey Green, when we talk about Sam Harris, we're talking about people who are definitely not right wing.
No, they're not.
Whereas Dave Rubin is a little more doctrinaire. But again, Jodi Shaw is not a right winger. She is on the left. Barry Weiss is not a right winger. She is on the left. When Yaron Brook talks about some of his heroes in this regard, people like Barry Weiss or even Scott Alexander, the gentleman who previously went under the name Slate Star Codex and is now Astral something else, even though by now everybody knows his real name, and he's let his day job go because of the New York Times destroyed his anonymity and his psychology practice. Same people who made Barry Weiss up and leave.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah.
So yes, these are.
So what's really
do we
going on
want to
here?
use the word heroes? Yeah, I think so. I'm willing to use the word heroes.
Heroic.
These are heroes of the left. These are independent thinkers.
Yeah, these are people of integrity. Now they may compartmentalize their own ideas of liberty and freedom, and they may not recognize economic liberty. They may not understand money. They may not understand the human mind and how that connects to wealth.
There's a whole discussion to be had about philosophy and politics there. But the idea of everybody on the left is all the same, that's just irrational.
It's not true.
It's not contradicts the evidence.
So I don't know if you want to get into I was actually going to get into critical race theory here. And I want to start with what I think are the benevolent misinterpretations.
Yes,
of critical race theory.
Well, let me just take 1 second to say thank you to Mary Aline for the super chat. She has chimed in on this, not just the chat. We got a great chat going on, a great conversation going on, but a super chat, which means she's supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK. You can do that too. If you ask us a question or make a comment, you can throw a couple dollars on it and help out ARC UK. If you want to help them more directly, you can become a member by going to aynrandcenter.co.uk. Link will be in the chat. Remember, that's center spelled Brit style, CENTRE. Just click the link in the chat. aynrandcenter.co.uk. You can become a member for as little as £10 a month, for as much as £100 a month if you're hardcore.
Yeah.
So with that said, by all means, feel free to keep asking us questions, keep the chat going, throw some money on them if you want special highlights, special attention paid to your comment. Now, critical race theory, what is the benevolent misinterpretation you've got in mind?
I need to start with this and then go into what actually it is. So this is what I understand other people have. I've seen in YouTube videos, I've seen in, some people that I know. Um, and it's all very lovely. It's a lovely interpretation. And it basically says that, we need to just put an emphasis on Black history, that, because of, for instance, the police brutality against some African Americans that have occurred, the people have been shot at unjustifiably and by mistake. People do make assumptions sometimes, especially in those police situations of, there's a Black person running, away, and obviously they're guilty of something. So it's a very difficult topic with regard to how what the police should be doing and how they should be reforming their practices. And that's another topic.
Well, that benevolent misinterpretation sounds like what we used to call fighting racism.
That's correct.
Since I was born in the 60s, we've been fighting
Yes.
racism. We've been against racism.
Right.
We've been working toward a colorblind society.
Yes.
But that ain't enough anymore. That's not anti-racism. Anti-racism is now a label that's part of critical race theory.
Right.
Which says if you're colorblind, you ain't doing enough.
Right. Right.
And silence is violence.
Silence is violence. Oh, yeah.
So yes, that benevolent misinterpretation. Well,
yeah,
okay, I get that, because
so,
that's what I've been doing all my life.
On Black history, and an emphasis on teaching the history of racism in the country, which is fine. Civil rights movement, wonderful. Rosa Parks, beautiful. Martin Luther King Jr., fantastic. And that. So another misinterpretation is that we need to educate people about unconscious bias. Now, I don't know that this is a psychological term that can border on determinism. In the better views of it, it does not. It basically, it talks about biases, confirmation bias, and things like that one needs to be aware of, perhaps they have in their own thinking, and by taking a course on psychology or however you can then learn about it, and just make sure that you check your premises and make sure that you're an integrated, clear thinking person. But they say, well, that's unconscious bias, and that we need to be more considerate of one another. So, I may not, I may have a verbal faux pas, as they used to say, which might lead into what looks like a deep-seated character flaw within me, based on racism, based on the ideas that I don't know, white people are supreme or something. So those are the benevolent misinterpretations I think that we all need to be aware of, because we need to then basically counter those arguments with what is this critical race theory? And basically they'll say, well, back in the 70s, there were some writers who thought that the civil rights movement didn't go far enough. The laws which promoted the equality of opportunity, and kind of slow, gradual change of getting rid of racism in our society in America, that those things were not effective. And so now, with this emotional advent of, police shootings and things like that, these folks saw an opportunity to say, we are valid in being impatient. We are valid about putting out these thoughts that are invalid, that are not true, that don't actually correspond with reality. And so instead of equality of opportunity, they promote equality of outcome, which we all know from Marxism and communism and everything. And so, the idea is that, you need to somehow push down the successful people to raise the disadvantaged up, which doesn't make any sense. And that's an inversion of reality. It doesn't actually work in reality, but through reparations and things like that, they feel that they do somehow. A lot of it's very much based on feeling and impatience, in my opinion.
Well, impatience is definitely a concept that would apply.
Yeah.
Looking here, a tenet of CRT is that racism and disparate racial outcomes are the result of complex, changing, and often subtle social and institutional dynamics, rather than explicit and intentional prejudices of individuals. CRT scholars view race and white supremacy as an intersectional social construct which serves to uphold the interests of white people at the expense of marginalized communities. In the field of legal studies, CRT emphasizes that formally colorblind laws can still have racially discriminatory outcomes. In other words, if you just make everything colorblind, things aren't going to get better, or at least aren't going to get right.
So now you need to somehow to redistribute outcomes.
You need to compensate.
Yeah, compensate. Yeah, and one of the ways to compensate is something that Jodi Shaw experienced, which was this basically belittling of her mind, of belittling of her as a woman who, thinks of herself as a reasonable thinking individual and not as somebody who is moved by some kind of instinctual determinism because of her skin color.
Yes, if somebody tells you, you need to stop talking, you're contradicting our lived experiences, and so you need to stay in your lane. What are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah, what that is basically saying is that reason is not a universal tool or value. And like, for instance, one of the tenets, very interesting tenet here, it's called standpoint epistemology. And this is a view that a member of a minority has an authority and ability to speak about racism that members of other racial groups do not have, and that this can expose the racial neutrality of law as false. So basically, that is innate ideas based on the idea that your skin color is different, or your ethnicity is different, which means it's based on racism, that your content of character is not determined by your choice or your effort and thought, but by your blood. And that's so horrible. And it's non-objective, it's anti-reason, or it's anti-objectivity, I would say. And it basically, and that's where a lot of the divisiveness and divisions come in. And it basically, it promotes racism, and it's a very, very sad thing to do. And I would advise against this critical race theory.
Yes, well, but it is a war of ideas.
Yes.
We're dealing with people. And of course, the cynics I'm going to put up the air quotes, the cynics on our side want to believe this is all power, it's all corruption, it's all evil. What we're really dealing with is a war of ideas. And we've got people who actually believe that history has shaped society, has created a world which is inherently racist. And you can run the stats to provide your justification of that. Obviously, some people start off with advantages other people don't have. And those often are along race lines. And then the question becomes, well, what are you supposed to do about that? Well,
according to critical race theory guru Ibram X. Kendi.
Ibram X. Kendi.
He says, quote, "The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination."
More discrimination, that's right.
And the only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination.
That's right.
So take the beatings forward. Take the suffering forward.
If you're driving down the street and you've accidentally steered too far to the right, you can't correct that by moving your steering wheel back to the center. You're going to end up in a ditch. No, you've got to go to the left. You've got to correct. And that's what these people believe. How are you going to fight that? You're going to fight that with better ideas. You are going to fight that by showing that you can't correct past discrimination by discriminating against people today for what happened 50, 100, 150 years ago. But it's not as simple as that. This stuff is hard. This stuff
Mhm.
is complicated.
Yep.
I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, it's a very interesting mishmash of terrible ideas. Um, but let's go to Ayn Rand here real quick. This is an interesting thing, and I think this applies to what's happening to people and the kind of psychological abuse and kind of just just abuse that Jody Shaw was talking about.
Right.
So
Okay.
so Screen Guide for Americans,
Screen Guide for Americans.
written by Ayn Rand.
Written by Ayn Rand before she was
So-
super famous.
So let's think about this. She says, now she's talking about the communists. It is the communists' intention to make people think that personal success is somehow achieved at the expense of others, and that every successful man has hurt somebody by becoming successful. It is the communists' aim to discourage all personal effort and to drive men into a hopeless, dispirited, gray herd of robots who have lost all personal ambition, who are easy to rule, willing to obey, and willing to exist in selfless servitude to the state.
1947. It is the communists' intention to make people think that personal success is somehow achieved at the expense of others, and that every successful man has hurt somebody by becoming successful. That cuts to the heart of it. I mean, it cuts to the heart of the answer
Mhm.
to both the communists and to the critical race theorists,
Yes.
which is that you achieve success not on the backs of those who've been wronged, nor by the advantages that the structural racism of the past has created for you, but by your own independent effort. And that is primary.
Mhm.
That comes first. To whatever extent you have advantages based on what's come before you.
Yeah. And imagine and just think of the implications that this kind of ideology has for Black Americans, for young Black Americans. Telling them up front that reason is impotent and that they cannot communicate with other people who look different from them. And that the only way they can ever achieve anything in life is through compensation, is through some sort of forced reparation. What does that say to a young Black person? I mean, that is so horrifyingly cruel and abusive to say that to them.
Even if he doesn't take it personally as a measure of his own ability, if he just takes it socially, it still tells him you live in a nightmare universe.
Yeah.
You live in a world that is set against you. And the reality is that whatever disadvantages he may face, whatever racism he may run into, it is trivial compared to his ability to transcend that.
Right.
As Ayn Rand observes, your outcomes aren't based on what you're confronted with, but what you opt to do.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that success is somehow achieved at the expense of others is so obviously wrong when success is achieved by creation, by production, by effort, by reason.
Right. Individual reason and effort.
So again, it's complicated. It ain't easy. It isn't as obvious as too many of us think.
Yeah, there's also, with regard to, this is from, I believe, the Return of the Primitive, the Anti-Industrial Revolution under the Age of Envy.
The Age of Envy.
Yeah, and Ayn Rand talks about equality and how, in a human rational context, it's equality before the law. And then she talks about how altruists ascribe what they ascribe to the word equality. And she says they turn the word into an anti-concept. They use it to mean not political, but metaphysical equality, the equality of personal attributes and virtues, regardless of natural endowment or individual choice, performance, and character. It is not man-made institutions, but nature, in other words, reality that they propose to fight by means of man-made institutions. And she goes on, since nature does not endow all men with equal beauty or equal intelligence, and the faculty of volition leads men to make different choices, the egalitarians propose to abolish the quote unfairness of nature and of volition, and to establish universal equality in fact, in defiance of facts. So basically she talks about how they invert the law of causality there, or try to invert the man-made versus the metaphysical. So that's something to keep in mind. All of these sorts of ideas, irrational ideas, you'll see the same patterns in them. But yeah. Oh, so one other person that I want to talk about real quick is Lacey Green. Now, if anybody knows about Lacey Green, she is a self-described humanist, feminist, liberal. Seriously.
See, I only know the name Lacey Green from 5 or 10 years ago when the sex positive movement was a thing.
Yes, she's involved in the sex positive movement and still is.
And it was a crazy movement to me because it was a bunch of people saying sex is good. Now, Ayn Rand said that to Leonard Peikoff when he said, well, what does philosophy have to say about sex? And her answer was, it says that sex is good. And I thought, oh, okay, that kind of answered that question 50 years ago. But it turns out, think about how recently gay marriage became a nationally accepted thing. It's interesting how far we have come and how it seems like, oh yeah, we've been very modern about our attitudes toward relationships and sexuality and men and women and gender and all of these things. And, now everybody's taking it in crazy directions, but we've been reasonable for years, right? But yeah, when Lacey Green came on the scene, whenever, again, that was maybe 10 years ago, she was actually talking about things that a lot of people were still either getting wrong or were just psychologically repressed about. People afraid to come out, and not just in terms of homosexuality, but in terms of sexuality in general. It used to be unusual for girls to say, oh yeah, I like sex too. It's not just something boys try to get from me.
So that's basically her background, but she has recently taken an interest in topics like cancel culture.
She was coming kind of from the left, but she got heat.
Overcoming mob mentality and groupthink. Very interesting. And I should tell you right up front, I'm just going to give you, as Scott says, the pitch. I don't know if that is referring to what I'm doing, but she presents ideas in such a very grounded, articulate way. And I'm just extremely impressed with her presentations recently. And she did a presentation called Cancel Culture is Real and It Sucks, a Libs Take. So she says she makes her case against cancel culture. She highlights 5 ways that cancel culture fails as a method of justice or actively perpetuates injustices. So she's saying that it actually doesn't perpetuate justice. It perpetuates more injustice than justice. And you should go ahead and check it out. That link is is already in the show notes.
Yes, it is.
But you know what? Don't close your mind to people who are liberal or call themselves liberals, because you'll be surprised at how pro-intellectualism and pro-reason and articulate they are. And just judging from Jody Shaw's letter, from all of these things. I mean, Johnny Depp just recently came out against cancel culture.
And the point that I would want to make, in addition to, again, all of the points that you've brought up, and again, this was Amy's episode, her idea to bring this up, but I have to say, one of the reasons why I want to understand what's going on the left, with the better people on the left, is that this is why we have survived as long as we have and why there is hope for the future. There's so many people who think, well, if we don't get behind whoever is leading the right now, and that is pretty clearly Donald Trump, then we're not fighting the battle that needs to be fought and we have no chance to win. And that's simply not true. In fact, we need a better right than what we've got right now. But the point is, they ain't the only ones fighting the battle, and they're not the only ones having an impact, because you've got all of these people who have essentially left the left, who are still consider themselves liberal and have some ideas in common with the left. But people running the gamut, from the Weinstein brothers and Sam Harris and members of the intellectual dark web, who used to consider themselves liberals and now are homeless intellectually, but are saying smarter things than most of their previous peers, or people in the entertainment industry, and there are many, many of them. You mentioned going back to people like Bill Maher, and you've got, writers and intellectuals and people in the news and newspaper, people like Barry Weiss and Jody Shaw and Peter Boghossian, and even cultural commentators like Lacey Green. You've got whole organizations like the Counterweight organization, linked to that in the show notes. It's not Donald Trump who's saving the world right now. It's people like this. And again, not just on the left, people on the right who have been willing to say what is true, regardless of who's running the party right now. People like Justin Amash, people who are willing to still think for themselves and not fall into line under this idea that, well, you go to war with the army you've got. At some point, if the general you've got is doing more harm than good, the only thing keeping us alive, the only thing keeping us going, are the better people on the right. And surprisingly enough, the better people on the left. I do have to go back to the chat real quick. We have such a great chat going on today. It's funny too, because Kathleen had said earlier, I would love to super chat, but skint after Brocon. To people who don't know what's going on in England, skint means short on money, and Brocon was the British Ocon that they had recently. So she says, so worth it. And I'm sure it was. I'm sure that was great. But the funny thing is, she did actually later on super chat us £2, saying fantastic. So complimenting the episode. Thank you for that. And also in the chat, Daniel Krause says, there's a good chance your favorite artist is a liberal.
That's very true.
Shut up my devices here.
Your favorite artist, your favorite rock, performer, or however.
All right. Yes. Your favorite artist may well be a liberal, certainly in rock and roll these days. Mary Aline says Glenn Lowry is another favorite, and she recommends, which I haven't read yet, Cynical Theories by Jane Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. So if you want a response to critical race theory, Cynical Theories, I've heard them interviewed, and it sounds like a very good read. Something to take in as well. Again, follow the chat here. There's so much great stuff going on there.
My next trick that I'm going to pull out of my magic hat is seeing if I can't find conservatives and Republicans who are taking on conservatives and Republicans. I want to see about that.
I'll settle for them being first-handed. I'll settle for them not caving into. I would never have thought that.
I want to see intellectual progress on the right.
I talked in 2017 about, you have the milquetoast Republicans like Mitch McConnell, and you have the principled Republicans like Ted Cruz.
Maybe.
And 4 years later, they're both on the Trump train. What the hell? How did Mitch McConnell?
I think there's a certain desperation going on.
There is. They're seeing that there's only one way to win. There's only one way to fight, or at least that's what they believe.
Once they're in, they do nothing.
once they're in, they're in. Well, they do things, and there's a lot going on. There's still 50 million Americans who are supporting this. We need better leadership. And that's, again, why I regard the present leadership of the Republican Party as a menace. Not because I have anything against the right per se, but because the leadership of the right has been ineffective and will be ineffective. I want to fight the left, and I need better fighters than what we've got, because this is an ideological war. I can't have the right led by a man who has said explicitly, well, I'm not ideological, and is proud of it. I have no principles.
So I would like to suggest politely to our wonderful friends out there in YouTube land, maybe it's time to reach out to the left.
Reach out to the left in what way?
Well, research some of these folks who are pushing back against critical race theory and cancel culture and all of that, and give them some ideas, give them the vocabulary, give them the ideas that will help them in their pursuit of their cause of basically pushing back against racism in this case, and be complimentary to them.
Yeah, it's hard to support them enthusiastically because they still believe a lot of things that I disagree with. But you're right. This is a multi-front war.
Yes.
Our general is who he is, so there's nothing I can do to support him. The opposition is what it is. But again, my take-home point for me, anyway, hopefully folks will take this away from the conversation. I'm sure the people who already believe it, but what we are fighting is ideas. The left is not all the same. And there, again, are people leaving the establishment left, certainly leaving the radical left, who are part of the reason why the left hasn't taken over yet. If you want the evidence, if you want the obvious evidence is that Joe Biden is president of the United States and not Bernie Sanders. That's all you need to know about today's left. And, some people will say, well, it was all a conspiracy to put Kamala Harris in a position to blah, blah, blah. You didn't need to put Kamala Harris in a position to take over if Joe Biden resigns. All you needed to do was elect Bernie Sanders. But they didn't put Bernie Sanders up. And why? Because, again, the left is not monolithic. They're not all CRT and woke and cancel culture and BLM and Antifa. The radical left is a menace, but that ain't the whole left. Hatchard reminds me about the Lincoln Project. And many other organizations on the right who could see, we need multiple voices on the right, because Lincoln some people Project, are just getting it wrong.
I know imploded a bit, and there was a schism, and then there was some sort of scandal.
Kind of like the Tea Party.
Yeah, and so I mean, they're still around, but they're not as effective as they used to be. Tazy, thank you so very much for your super chat. And she says, have you ever considered dressing up as Trump for Halloween?
I have not considered dressing up as Trump for Halloween, but that's an almost irresistible idea. It's so wrong, it's right.
Oh, it's kind of scary to me. I don't know. It's no, I cannot. She also says I could be Melania.
No. Yeah. Hey, if I'm going to be Trump,
I have to do this. No, I can't. That's my impression of Melania.
Melania
that's all I can
always looks like she's trying to be dignified, and as a model, she knows how to be dignified.
Lips.
But she looks so miserable. She is absolutely in the last place she wants to be on earth. She always looks miserable. Even when she smiles, she looks miserable.
I feel so bad for her. She just looks like a lost soul.
I mean, and somehow Donald Trump doesn't look miserable. He just looks like an automobile where somebody put a brick on the accelerator pedal and removed the steering wheel, and it's just going down the road and doing what it does. But Melania, oh my God, yeah, no, don't dress up as Melania.
No, that's too scary.
But thanks for the idea. Thank you for the suggestion.
Very much for the idea.
I will certainly consider dressing up as Trump for Halloween. It would be frightening. Wouldn't it be frightening? If you saw me dressed up as Donald Trump, what would be scarier than that?
Well, you'd have to get the orange fake tan.
Sure.
So yeah, but I don't know. I just I think that might be a little bit too much for me, Robert.
I think it might be too much. Fun idea though. Yes. So again,
you can be Trump and I can be a big pussy and you can grab me.
I would not have thought of that.
I could wear a vagina hat.
I would not have thought of that.
Oops. Oh, are we live?
Yeah, I don't think those hats were a product of the right. Of course, I still don't believe Donald Trump is a product of the right. Unfortunately, I think
Tazy likes that.
He's not left, he's not right. He's just The Apprentice, the Donald Trump show. And
Oh my gosh. Anyway,
I didn't mean to get into
so
too much Trump bashing, other than to make the point that if you think the left is monolithic, if
yeah,
you think they're all the same, you don't understand the left. And that is my bottom line. I think the evidence
Yeah.
of that, especially given Barry Weiss and Lacey Green and Jody Shaw and 100 other people.
Yeah, and reach out to the people on the left who are pro-abortion, who are fighting for women's reproductive rights and all of that, if you like, and then help them, give them the words.
And again, how have we survived? How has the economy remained strong? How has the nation not? I know there are some folks out there who think we are, one misstep away from either World War III or a communist America. Neither of those things are anywhere remotely true. Things have, setting aside the pandemic, things have never been better. The economy has never been stronger. There's never been a better time to be alive. People have never been safer. They've never been healthier. Our lifespans have never been as long. We've never had as much opportunity, both in leisure and in business. Things have never in history been better than they are right now. And why is that? Because everything Ayn Rand said was true. Everything that our fans and listeners have said is true about the right and the left. Why are things better than they've ever been before? And the answer is because the left is not monolithic, and neither is the right. And there are still individual thinkers out there. There are still heroes out there.
Yep.
There are still people keeping the wheels of the world turning. We may be headed for a dip because of this pandemic and because of some of the things that have happened in answer to that. But by and large, and in the long run, things are getting better all the time.
Yes.
I don't think that's inevitable. I believe in free will. I've seen evil. I've studied World War II. I've studied communist Soviet Russia. But all of the evidence is things are getting better all the time. And the reason is because there are still individuals. There are still thinkers on the left and on the right.
There are still individuals on the left who consider themselves to be individuals.
And when they run into enough nonsense, they walk away from it.
Yes.
So support those heroes on the left and support the heroes on the right, and be the hero in your own life. And thank you for listening to what has been an unusually political episode. It was the best of episodes. It was the worst of episodes. No, actually, Scott just posted that little Dickens quote. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And he's right. And I do think that, again, we're in the middle of a culture war. We're in the middle of a war of ideas. I don't mean to minimize any of that. I'm just glad he's willing to quote the best of time parts too, because both of those things somehow magically are true. It really is the best of times, and in some ways the worst of times. So thank you for joining us. Before we wrap up, or rather before we jump over to Clubhouse, again, I'll repeat, you should be supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK. If you're not already, you can become a member by going to aynrandcenter.co.uk and becoming a member.
Yes.
If you want to support the work of Robert and Amy Nasir, now that it's Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir officially.
Or just me.
Or just Amy, if you want to support Amy.
This is just for Amy.
Well, but there's no PayPal link. There's no Patreon at amynasir.com. I think there's just a bunch of old bunny photographs. So, oh my gosh. So Amy finally came across with a little bit of profanity, and Sam's in for $20 on the super chat. Boom.
Thank you, Sam.
Woo! And Action Jackson, the man behind everything that Yarn Brook does that has any production values to it, is also in for $5 and says, love your segments here. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK, outstanding. Love it and hilarious. That's really funny. And we never do the profanity thing. Maybe we need a little more of that, a little more of that kind of action. And, but we won't. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if we bring it on. We'll see if we bring on the Trump costume.
It needs to be sparingly enough to where it's shocking still.
Yes. And ARC UK has posted the link to robertnasir.com. If you want to support us directly, our Patreon and PayPal are there as well. Thank you so much. Excellent stuff in the chat. A few things I missed. I need to go through and read them all. But first, we need to jump over to Clubhouse. So with that said, as always, we wish you success, happiness, and we wish to see you. We want to hear your voice over in Clubhouse. Over and out.